Okay, good morning everyone, and welcome to our webinar Employee Wellbeing and Engagement During a Pandemic. I am Emmanuel Clement, Partnership Manager for the SEMLEP Growth Hub. For those who don't know, SEMLEP is a public-private body whose role is to help economic growth thrive across the South East Midlands. But in this difficult time, we are focusing on supporting businesses through our business support team and webinars like these. During this webinar, we welcome your questions. So if you could please type them in the chat section, that would be great. More than ever, we need to support the well-being of our people as we all navigate these difficult times together. With so many people being furloughed or working remotely, employers are needing to find new creative ways of keeping their employees engaged, supported and informed. To talk about these important topics, I would like to introduce you to our panel today. We've got Amanda Rowe from Amanda Rowe Hypno, who is a clinical hypnotherapist and psychotherapist. Sheena Harris and Greg Guilford from HR Solutions, who is an expert outsourced HR consultancy. Welcome to you three. And we're going to start with Amanda. So Amanda, welcome, and over to you, please.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Okay, let me know when you can see that, if that's okay, please. I'm just starting the actual presentation element.
Yeah, it's great, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be here. It's my absolute pleasure to be talking to you all today. I'm here in my capacity, as Emmanuel said, as a clinical hypnotherapist and psychotherapist. Prior to this, I had 30+ years in senior leadership in the corporate world. And in my final sort of few years, I was working at Sky and I was on their board for their people program, and also on the board of mentors and graduate schemes, in addition to sort of my day-to-day role. And I work with organisations still now, discussing the well-being of their people. So we're going to be covering off some of those essential factors that you might want to consider in a well-being program or plan for your people. How you might want to look at that sort of through fresh eyes at the moment with our current landscape of the pandemic we're all facing into. And also just touching on the importance of co-creating our well-being plans and any evolution of those with our people. So we're going to just start with well-being and what it is. It's essentially how we're doing. And there's a number of factors that play into how we're doing: the economy, our health, our relationships, and our personal well-being. And as it says on here, our personal well-being is how satisfied we are with our lives. It's about our sense of purpose and value and how we feel emotionally day to day. So it's really easy to see that our work environment and how content we are in our workspace, how safe we feel, can have a huge impact, positively or otherwise, on our personal well-being and our general well-being overall. Okay, so well-being strategy. It requires careful thoughts about what you're wanting to achieve, how and to what end. And most organisations, as we all know, are pretty good at focusing on their business growth strategy. We all have our sort of client base and products and services strategies, marketing plans. And actually lots of organisations work hard on the people development space too, which is going to enhance the working experience of their employees. And whether that's through promotional opportunities and development plans, talent sourcing, great. However, depending on your approach to your well-being plan, everything else can kind of either be underpinned or undermined by that. It's essential that when we're talking about a well-being plan, it focuses primarily on the needs of the employee and doesn't get drawn away with considerations around how that's going to support the business plan. It needs to be really focused on the well-being of the employees, and that's going to require the right people involved in that plan to ensure it stays on track. And of course, there are benefits to the business and customers indeed by looking after the well-being of our people. As I've put up on the screen there, Deloitte's review in 2019 demonstrated that there's significant return to be had for every pound that we can spend on the well-being of our people. Much of that would be seen in recovery of lost working hours and increased productivity, of course. And the good news for companies is that many of the services that we can offer to our employees that supports their mental health and their well-being can actually be tax-free services that's worth investigating for your organisation as well. EAPs are employee assistance programs, mental health first aid, having people on site who people can go to as a first touch point if they're concerned about themselves or somebody else and how they're feeling, medical treatments, etc., as it says on the screen. So to put that into an image, if you really focus on what your people are going to get out of having great positive well-being and feeling good about themselves and what they're doing, sense of purpose, a reduction in their stress levels, an improvement in their job satisfaction and potentially their physical and mental health, there will always be secondary benefits to both the customer in their experience engaging with your people and also potentially for your business, not only on performance, but on the retention of great people and actually the attraction of new talent too. So whilst it's really easy to get sidetracked and question ourselves about whether every pound spent is immediately benefiting the business, there are always subsidiary benefits to looking after our people really well and their well-being as a whole. Just a little bit around an organisation's role, particularly around the mental health aspect of well-being. There are legal responsibilities that demonstrating that we are assessing the employee's risk of workplace stress and that we have the tools and the resources and the plans in place to respond appropriately. And the level of having to be able to detail this depends on the number of employees within a business. And then there's more the duty of care about how we want to promote well-being and mental health. Maybe we can flow that through a plan that can be shared with our people and then ensure that it's also reflected in our policies and activities, our ways of working. In principle, it has been demonstrated there are only 3 real core needs for someone to increase and improve their well-being at work. Those are to be heard, I understood, someone's listening, to be valued, which despite whatever I'm telling you and whatever you're seeing in me, you appreciate me, and to feel safe. And that safe one is an interesting one. That's safe to be myself, safe to say how I feel, safe to make recommendations. So it's worth considering these factors when you're thinking about your personal well-being plan for your people. Okay, so there are 5 areas to nurture personally for our well-being. I don't think any of them will surprise you too much, but we'll go round starting at the top right-hand corner. And we have sort of physical movement, activity. And the reason this is so important actually is because it helps people feel as if they're achieving something. So there's achievement in physical movement, as well as obviously the positive endorphins and feelings we get from personal movement and health benefits that we all know about. Moving down, we have connectivity, which is not actually that challenged, is it, at the moment, because we're all doing exactly as we are today. But connection isn't only remotely. People want to feel that other kind of rapport and connection with people. It's very important for our sense of belonging and our self-worth. That's why it plays such an important role in people's well-being. And moving across to the bottom left, we have learning new things. So again, for learning, it's a sense of self-esteem and confidence when we learn new things, playing in again to our sense of well-being and ease with ourselves. Moving up to the top left-hand corner, we had just the word slow down. This is about being present. And I'm sure many of you on this call and many of your people or your families and friends refer to mindful practices. It doesn't need to be about mindful practices, particularly, although they're fantastic. It is about just being in the moment and practicing when you're at work or anywhere, in just taking the moment as it comes and not getting sidetracked by everything else that might happen. Being present helps us to feel connected. It also helps us to feel a bit more peaceful and at ease with ourselves. The last image we have right at the very top of the page is about being kind and helping others. Now, it's maybe hard to think about how this works within the work environment, but it doesn't take too much thinking about. And it's really important in terms of our sense of purpose, which is very important to our well-being, and again, our sense of self-worth. So these 5 areas are worth considering in any well-being program as to how you may support your people and build that into a program. These areas really have a good and positive influence, if dealt with correctly, on our individual sense of well-being. So we've got those words dotted around here on the screen, as you can see: connect, be present, learning, be kind, physical movement. And so in the disc in the middle, you'll just see some things that you may want to use as a kind of takeaway in terms of ideas of how you may adjust your plans, your well-being plans, your people plans at this moment in time. One really important factor here to consider is the co-creation of plans and the importance of allowing your people to have a say in well-being plans. Well-being is about the employee. So there's a couple of key messages just by including them, and that is you matter, and also that we want to get this right, that you are actually delivering a plan that does deliver for what the people need. Now, it's useful to think about having somebody of a significant level having an investment, a personal investment in the plan, so that your population of people are recognizing that it has significant gravitas behind it and it's important to the business. And it's also essential that you use people through the line within your team to help create that plan and help it to evolve. Maybe get involved in the surveying of staff and what's important once you've decided to achieve, allowing other people within your organisation to help you actually create the plan to do that. This will be a plan that will be better bought into, that you know will be responding to the needs of your people and will be kept up to date. It's very important that that's an ongoing evolution to ensure that it can adjust to the various changes that we have going on, especially like now. Now, I've been privy to a number of conversations, meetings, sessions, and just sort of ad hoc chats really about well-being plans and how organisations try to tackle this and get it right, especially around mental health. And it's great that there are organisations trying to do this and do it well. But there are occasions where it maybe needs a bit of work. So there's examples of a gentleman talking to me about this, saying, well, we were all told to turn up in a particular room at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning, have coffee and cake and talk about how we were feeling, which as a gesture and an intent is probably positive. But if I had a physical ailment, something wrong with me physically, I wouldn't necessarily want to go and discuss it with people. So there's no assumption that should be made that people want to discuss with everybody and openly and comfortable to do that, to discuss that with a group of colleagues they may know well or not well at all. So it's just thinking through about what's appropriate for your people. In some organisations, and this is a particular example that I've been discussing with a company, there was a memo put out, there'll be no emails post 9 p.m. because they were concerned that people would feel compelled to answer them. It wasn't good for their mental health, their well-being, their sense of being able to shut down. Of course, that just added additional stress to people who felt much better about getting everything off their desk and out of their minds before the next day, and they could start again. So rather than putting blanket things out there, it's good to really engage with your organisation, your employee population, around the sorts of things that might work. Be open, talk to them about trying things, get their ideas, because they will be able to tell you what they need. So some of the things we might look at the moment, these are just examples, just a few tips about what you might want to think about right now. A communication plan for all staff. It sounds obvious, but actually how often, when, what's it going to say, what's it going to relay, what sort of subjects are in there? Is it for furloughed staff as well as the people that are still possibly working remotely or tucked in the office almost by themselves? Technical support and tools, ensuring people have what they need to do their job under these circumstances. Do they need extra support at the moment? Promoting and encouraging health and fitness. Don't forget, this plays into the 5 areas of nurture that we mentioned before. So without establishing a big brother culture, promoting and encouraging health and fitness is an excellent way for an organisation to show they're dedicated to the wellness of their people. There might be adjustments you want to make to your EAP to include some of those potentially tax-free benefits at this moment in time. Maybe help your people to set up remote communities and chats if they are lacking that feeling of connection, or they could potentially be. Reward and plan acts of kindness. I don't know if any of your organisations support sort of volunteering days, etc. Normally it may feel like something quite removed from where we are at the moment, but get creative. Maybe think about how you can reward and plan and support acts of kindness. It's a great opportunity to elevate your company's culture around mental wellness and support. The tools are already there. This may be a great time, which I'm sure many of you are doing, and ensuring they are completely accessible to your people. Co-create an improvement plan. As I mentioned before, creating wellness plans, well-being programs, people plans, whatever you want to term them, is fantastic. But if you have an opportunity now to engage with your people at another level, get them more involved, improving that plan, making sure that it constantly evolves, co-creating that with the people that it's going to impact most. Promoting self-development. Might seem like a difficult time to do it with the other challenges we have in hand, but this is the time. Remember that learning is one of those key nurture areas, and people feeling like they're achieving, feeling more confident, feeling like they know more is a great way to serve their sense of well-being. And at the bottom there, you'll see we have remote working support. Now, working remotely might be very new to a lot of people. So I've taken this subject, and we just have one more slide to walk through where I might be able to offer you a few ideas in that space around how you may be doing that. So really ramping up the kind of well-being, positive well-being when we're home working. And I don't know, of course, for each of your organisations, whether you have a lot of furloughed people, or people working remotely. But let's assume some people are across the audience that we have today. This is worth considering. The challenges are multiple for our people. We don't know all of their individual circumstances. Those situations at home for them to be working there may be difficult. Maybe on a practical level it might be difficult. They may be in limited space and a noisy space. And actually maybe they find it quite terrifying to work completely on their own if they haven't done that before. They don't really understand the rules. It might be completely new to them. And what we're asking them to do, the big challenges are, we are asking people to exercise a great deal more self-motivation and control. We're asking them to work under pressure because potentially there are less people within the organisation. And maybe they don't have the same physical, obviously, support or leadership. We can all do great things working remotely, but we don't understand necessarily how people thrive off of having that support right there with them in the room. And of course, there's other uncertainties that are unquantified for each individual around how they're feeling about their own personal circumstances, health, family, job security, etc. So there's kind of the response is to ensure that we're promoting an open culture and supporting some sort of 3 key areas, I guess, are worth looking into with your people. That's setting up for success, because our well-being is predicated on us feeling like we're achieving, like everything is okay. Achieving sort of productivity still. Again, this is about our sense of confidence that we're able to deliver what we want to in our well-being is dependent on this. And our mental health, which clearly has a massive role within people's general well-being. So I'm just going to take you through just to hear about the sorts of things you might look at in those areas, the way you might sort of frame this and the categories you might consider. So under setting up for success, of course, you've got people's actual workspace, their own physical workspace they're working within. You can look at how they're establishing routine. Maybe they're really good at switching off at the end of the day. Maybe they're really bad at getting started, whatever that might be. Helping people maintain routine and structure at the moment for anybody in or outside of work is really important for them taking some control in a situation, a macro worldwide situation we don't feel that in control of. And ensuring they have the tech and the networks around them to be able to do their job well. It will feel different for many people. Under sort of the remaining productive headline, you might think about really working through accountabilities. They may have changed in this new world for now, and helping people use the tools and create the tools to take the accountability they need to when they're working remotely is something we shouldn't take for granted, and we can help them with. Setting really clear expectations. What is possible for these people to achieve in this new situation? What is possible for them to get through and deliver back? And having the confidence to fully understand what's expected of them is going to certainly help. And mobilising their network and support. We're making that work for them when we're working remotely, the people around them who may be able to help. You know, achieving is one of the most important factors, feeling like we can achieve our goals in our sense of well-being and resilience. So creating the network and support they need to do that. Helping them to identify stresses is really important. So here we're talking about their physical, emotional stresses, understanding that any changes in their mood, their behaviour, how they're feeling about themselves, just being able to identify those stresses is certainly important. And making personal adjustments for these people as well, if need be, when it comes to mental health, being prepared to do that, being prepared to make personal adjustments where they are required, and ensuring that people understand that. So with what we have on this page, we're really saying these are the ways you might demonstrate to your population that you are considering their well-being, specifically if they're working from home at the moment. Okay, I hope that's useful. That's me wrapped up on the slides that I was going to deliver today. So Emmanuel, Sam, back to you if you want to lead with the questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, we've got a question.
Okay.
What would be your top tip for something that could be implemented quickly for employee wellness and well-being at this point in time?
Okay, so, you know, failing the ability to sort of get a big plan out there, etc. I would say having a point of communication, be that once a week or be that a person that people can go to understand more about what you're prepared to offer as an organisation. Maybe that's a chat room, maybe it's maybe your mental health first aider, maybe you have an anonymous kind of chat that's set up and everyone knows it is on a Tuesday at whatever time, creating a way that people can feel heard, valued and safe. Just one touch point, because what you're doing in that moment is you're creating a message for your people, which is, we care. It almost doesn't matter what you put in place. You're telling them you're putting something additional in place to give them a voice and to be supported. And that can grow and develop and evolve when you understand the sorts of things that are being asked for and needed. But just put that touch point in place for people.
Okay, thank you. How do you deal with a situation when you have no contact since you were furloughed 4 weeks ago?
What do you mean, how do you deal with what situation? Sorry.
If you're a furloughed employee and nobody in your organization, contacted you for 4 weeks.
I mean, I'm not, the other guys may be able to help more on the sort of HR support side in regards to those terms. But I do know when it comes to your well-being, and if you're asking for support, if you're furloughed, you can't be seen to be generating any business for your organisation, you absolutely can get in touch with your HR specialist or your line manager to say that you're looking for support. And I would encourage anyone to do that. I know the guys from the HR support team will be able to give more information on the sort of legalities and process side, but absolutely do reach out. It is the responsibility of any employer to take care, as we talked about duty of care, of their employees at any time, furloughed or otherwise. They're employed by that company. So do ask for what you need.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. I think we're going to ask Sheena. And if you've got any more questions,
thank you very much,
please.
everyone.
Over to you, Sheena, please.
Thank you. It was really interesting, Amanda. Right, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, hopefully everyone can see the slides that we have for you today. So, in continuing with the theme, myself and Greg Guilford will be taking you through another 2 topics. Before we do so, though, we'd like to say a quick welcome from us at HR Solutions. Whether you're working from your usual location, working from home, perhaps keeping up to date whilst furloughed yourself, or out of work, whatever your situation, obviously you're all very welcome, and hopefully what we have to say will give you benefit. So we always like to start by introducing ourselves. I know that's already been done to a degree. I work at HR Solutions as a HR consultant, and I support a portfolio of clients. And Greg Guilford, CEO, is also with us today. So the final 2 agenda topics we will be covering with you are supporting employees affected by COVID-19, which I'll be covering, and maintaining engagement across your business, which Greg Guilford will be delivering to you. So if we start by looking at the different ways in which your employees may be affected by COVID-19, and there can be a range of different ways that they will be affected at this time. For instance, your employees may become ill themselves with the virus, which, as we know, the initial symptoms may be a new continuous cough and or a high temperature. So as a reminder, if they're still attending the workplace where you should have social distancing measures in place, they should go home and remain there for 7 days from the onset of any symptoms. If the workplace remains open, should a staff member confirm that they have been tested and have the coronavirus, this doesn't mean instant closure of the business, but instead you should seek guidance from the government response page for the latest details in relation to cleaning requirements, associated PPE, all of that from the Public Health England. So for periods of sickness related to COVID-19, employees will be eligible for SSP from the first day of their absence from work. Isolation notes can be gained from NHS 111 online if necessary, and should the illness persist potentially beyond the 7 days initially. Now remember, as a business, you may be able to reclaim up to 2 weeks of that SSP if your employee was off work because of the virus or self-isolating or shielding. if your PAYE payroll scheme started on or before the 28th of February, and you had fewer than 250 employees on the 28th of February. Those periods of sickness must have started on or after the 13th of March or the 16th of April if shielding. So there's a few different criteria for that claim back. Now, if your employee has mild symptoms of the virus, but is happy to continue to work from home, where they may already be at this time, then they are able to do so, but you would need to maintain contact with them to ensure that they're still fit to be working, and perhaps carry out any risk assessments to satisfy yourself that they're fit to continue working remotely. And obviously you'll be checking in with them regularly. Now, obviously, as we also understand, there may well be many employees who are also currently on furlough. So if a furloughed employee becomes sick, as they're not able to be both on furlough and sick leave at the same time, it is then up to the employer to decide whether to move these employees onto SSP or to keep them on furlough at the furloughed rate. This may mean, therefore, that employees will be less likely to report sickness whilst on furlough, as that salary would be more than SSP. So when your employees are ill, as a duty of care, as I've said, you should be maintaining contact and checking in with them. They should also be following the procedures within your sickness absence policies. If their absence extends over the 7 days, they may be required to send you the NHS 111 isolation note if they're unable to gain any fit notes from their GP. Now, I know that Amanda had referenced the use of EAP schemes, and this is something that I'll repeat through these sections. So you may also wish to reiterate the use of any employee assistance programs that you may have in place, as having the virus could provoke further anxieties for such employees. EAP schemes will usually provide confidential access to phone line support and sometimes counselling to support employees' well-being in the workplace and in their personal lives. So moving on to the situation where some of your employees share their home with others and others may have signs of the virus. So in those situations, the employee should remain at home for 14 days, whether they have symptoms of that virus or not. If they're able to work remotely from home, as they may already be doing so, then they can continue as normal. Or if this is not something they're currently doing, you would need to determine whether this is feasible for them and conduct assessments accordingly. If the employee is not able to work remotely, then SSP would be applicable for the self-isolation period from day one. Again, it would be a case of maintaining contact with your employee during this time. And then after the isolation period, unless obviously they develop symptoms themselves, then they would be able to resume their work for you if they had ceased this during that time. Again, if you have one in place, ensure that you reiterate the use of the company EAP scheme. So in terms of support for your employees, as we know, sadly, many people across the UK have lost their lives due to this coronavirus. So some of your employees now may have, unfortunately, already been directly affected in this way, which has another layer of complexity due to the way in which funerals are being managed at this time. Normally now, there are less people able to attend those sorts of things. Therefore, a good starting point is to ensure that you follow your compassionate and bereavement policies in relation to any paid time off, taking into consideration added funeral issues. You may wish to be more flexible on the time that you're giving to those employees. Some employees may feel that they are unable to resume their duties after a paid period of compassionate or bereavement leave, and instead they might submit fit notes from GPs for extended periods of time off on sickness absence. So it's just taking that into consideration as well. As you may know, just this month, the government produced a new entitlement called parental bereavement leave, which allows parents to be absent from work for up to 2 weeks, whilst receiving a statutory minimum rate of pay, which is currently £151.20 per week, or 90% of their average weekly earnings, whichever is the lower. There are some other qualifying criteria for eligibility for pay, but it is a day one right for the leave to be taken. For pay, there is a length of service criteria. Employees need to have been employed for at least 26 weeks up to the end of the relevant week. And that relevant week is the week ending with a Saturday immediately before the week of a death, or in pregnancy cases, a stillbirth. Some of your employees who may be affected by bereavements may already be on furlough. So again, it is beneficial, therefore, to reiterate any company support packages, such as EAP schemes at this time, irrelevant, because this is on the basis that you may not immediately be aware of who may be affected and how. So, in terms of schooling and looking after children and the juggling that many of us are doing at home at the moment, obviously we don't yet know when the schools will be reopening to pupils, to all pupils. Employees who are unable to work from any location because they have caring responsibilities resulting from coronavirus can be furloughed. So employees that need to look after children also can be furloughed, but you should still agree this with the relevant employee and follow up in writing, ensuring that you remember that furlough is for a minimum of 3 weeks. And then we move on to the shielding or vulnerable groups. So employees who are unable to work from any location because they are shielding in line with public health guidance, or who need to stay at home with someone who is shielding, can also be furloughed. And you may have also received queries from employees who have not yet or haven't received a government letter to shield in line with public health guidance, but who feel that their health places them into a vulnerable position. So you should discuss with those employees ways to address their concerns, such as feasible ways to work from home, or alternatively, if the work location remains open, it would be a case of ensuring that you carry out risk assessments for them in line with health and safety, and follow the current government advice on social distancing and hygiene measures in the workplace. Your employee may also wish to liaise with their GP to discuss their health further, which could result in GP guidance on reasonable adjustments. If you're not able to provide employees with work due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it is not feasible to work from home, you are able to discuss furlough with them. However, as I've said, you should still agree this with the relevant employee and follow up in writing. So there are many employees who are now wearing more than one hat, as I said, whilst working from home and juggling responsibilities. Where parents are able to work from home and juggle the demands of teaching their children, businesses are adapting to these requirements more so, and agreeing to maybe flex working hours in order that parents can continue to earn a wage and juggle those teaching demands at the same time. Additionally, some businesses may also agree temporary alterations to working patterns in order that employees can work at times to suit their requirements to aid their children's teaching. This additional responsibility placed on your employees at this time may again bring about increased feelings of pressure and anxiety. It is advisable, therefore, to keep this in mind and reiterate again any EAP schemes you may have in place for that additional support, and/or make clear that you are open to having discussions if any employees are finding things particularly difficult at this time. So we also obviously must consider the mental health and well-being of all employees. We want to ensure ultimately that our employees are as happy, healthy and comfortable as possible. There may already be some employees you are aware of who have underlying mental health conditions. Perhaps, therefore, if they're not working with you and they're working remotely, you may want to have a few more regular check-ins to see how they are and offer avenues for more regular contact if they feel that they need this. As these are unprecedented times, and the longer the lockdown continues, the more we see these death rates sort of rising in the media, the more this is likely to have an impact on everyone's health and well-being. And therefore, it's a case of making sure that you do check in with all employees in various ways. Therefore, when you're having your team updates and or individual one-to-ones, as you know your employees best, listen to them. If you feel that anyone is acting out of character, for instance, or not their normal self, then there could be issues at play. So it'd be a case of checking in with them, finding out whether you might need to consider temporary adjustments. And again, if you do have any EAP schemes, it's reiterating the use of those things. Now, finally, I just wanted to flag a new proposed temporary statutory leave that you might or might not yet be familiar with. So the Coronavirus Act 2020 brought in several measures, one of which, Schedule 7, was Emergency Volunteering Leave, abbreviated to EVL. So this is a temporary form of statutory unpaid leave for employees who wish to volunteer in the health and social care sectors during the current crisis. So whilst we still await the regulations to confirm the details and also confirmation of the date on which Schedule 7 comes into force, we can give you an overview of this scheme. So to qualify for EVL, a worker must be issued with what's called an Emergency Volunteering Certificate, EVL certificate, and this would be by an appropriate authority. This would confirm that they have been approved as an emergency volunteer and that they will volunteer for a specified period. And there is no service requirement with an employer for a worker to take EVL. The notification requirements would be that the worker must provide an employer with at least 3 working days written notice before the first day of the period specified in the EV certificate. They should also confirm the start date and length of their volunteer period. A working day is defined as any day other than a Saturday or Sunday, Christmas Day, Good Friday, or a bank holiday in any part of the UK. A worker must provide their employer with a copy of the EV certificate, and they can take a set block of 2, 3, or 4 consecutive weeks of EVL during a period of 16 weeks, which is known as a volunteering period. So for those with the status of employee, those terms and conditions of employment, except those relating to remuneration, continue to apply during EVL, and there are protections also on pension rights. Workers taking EVL are protected from detriment and receive an additional unfair dismissal protection as well. And when they return to work after their EVL, they are entitled to return to the job in which they were employed before the absence on terms no less favourable. So at the moment, we understand that this period of EVL would be unpaid. However, we await the regulations to confirm what payments may be made by the state to volunteers in terms of compensation for loss of earnings and travelling and subsistence and those sorts of things. It is also thought that some employers might be prepared to continue to pay volunteers, which may be similar to some jury service arrangements currently. So hopefully, when the information is produced in terms of when this may become live, more information will be available from government. But this is just a bit of an overview for you at this time. So that's come to the end of the topic that I'll be presenting before we move on to Greg in relation to maintaining engagement across your business. I appreciate there may be some questions, so I'll go back to Emmanuel and Sam.
Okay, thanks, Sheena. We've got a question for you. Would you expect that any COVID-19 related absences are disregarded for any absence triggers?
That's a good question. I mean, obviously, this is unprecedented times. So essentially, there should be an acknowledgement within any organisation that any such absences may be disregarded on the purposes of when you're looking at maybe issues with employees, where there might be high absence levels potentially, then there may be some discussion around reasonable adjustment, is what we call the disregarding of specific absences that may be related to underlying health conditions, for example, or potentially related to the COVID situation. Obviously, we know that there may be people that are more vulnerable, that maybe have some underlying health conditions. They may not be shielding, they may not have received any letters to shield, but they may still have some other conditions which might make them a little more vulnerable at this time. So certainly that is something that you should be taking into consideration and considering that as reasonable adjustment.
Okay, thank you, Sheena. Are employees who are currently furloughed able to take EVL? And would it be the employer's decision as to whether to continue paying furlough salary, saying this is a government scheme?
At the moment, I think we're going to have to wait for some more information to come out. The overview that I've given is pretty much all we've got at this time. So I wouldn't want to start giving advice that we're not completely aware of in relation to how the furlough scheme would work in conjunction with EVL. I would like to think that there would be some allowances in relation to allowing employees to do so. Certainly at the moment on furlough, there is an ability to volunteer, but obviously they should not be bringing any income in to any employer that they have, or alternatively any associated business. So in relation to EVL, I think that's another layer that we may just need to wait for a bit more information to come out on. Okay.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you, Sheena. Last but not least, Greg, please.
Okay.
Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. So yeah, I'm going to lead us home now with the maintaining engagement across your business section of this webinar. So obviously we touched on sort of how you can support individuals from a mental health and well-being, as well as anybody who has COVID-19, and how you might manage them and support them whilst they're off sick and on furlough. But it's important to obviously engage with individuals who, it's not a normal working environment for them. They're working at home. You may obviously have some people still in the office, but I think most organizations will have the majority of their employees now working from home. So we've kind of touched on some of these points throughout the webinar already, but it is important to maintain that regular communication channels. You've probably seen a lot of companies are taking screenshots and posting all over LinkedIn about how they're having their team chats, and they're doing that via a number of methods. Microsoft Teams is quite popular. Zoom seems to be the most popular at the moment, but there are other options like Skype and GoTo as well. But I think the important thing is to kind of make sure you're having that regular communication in some form. From experience, colleagues like to still have that face-to-face contact, with the screen shares and stuff like that. So some of those technologies enable that, but if not, it's important to still be talking to your employees as well. And do the things that you would usually do as well. So make sure you're doing those company and departmental updates, and you're sharing information that you would do throughout your normal business. So whether it's a team meeting and you take minutes, make sure they're communicated, and also do company updates as to what's going on in the business, and any other individual work updates that you would still be expected to have come through from your employees. It's important to obviously just take time just to talk to colleagues as well. So as a business, we're encouraging regular meetings with our team, but obviously it's too easy to send emails at the moment. So we're encouraging everybody in our team to not just send an email to ask a question or use Teams to do a chat conversation, but actually take the time to maybe take a screen share and call them to actually have interaction with your colleagues as well. And that's, in individual level, employee to employee, but obviously senior management to their team as well. And ensure that important information is still shared. So however you used to do that, it might have been an email, but you might want to choose to do that as a company meeting instead. So where you're inviting your team to a company update event where actually as a senior manager or owner of the business that you're on screen talking to your employees. It just has a bit more engagement than sending an email with a few bits of information, and allow them to ask you questions as well as to what's going on in the business as well. Some of the things we've kind of talked about already is employee surveys for input whilst working from home. So you can do that in a number of ways. You may already have used employee surveys in the past to gauge your engagement of your team, but obviously working from home is slightly different for everybody in terms of how you might manage them, and obviously how they are being managed. And Amanda talked about, obviously there's a lot of self-motivation that they need to do to kind of get up and work in the morning in a new way. So doing those surveys is important, and you might find things that you have a perception as to what is actually happening with these individual employees working from home. But doing surveys, you always uncover something that you weren't expecting. Talking from experience, we recently did a survey to our team. It was about 14 questions, trying to understand how we're doing as a business in terms of supporting them while they're working at home, and uncovered things that we weren't expecting ourselves. Whilst I think we've maintained a degree of engagement with our team, there was things like social engagements that we hadn't really considered. We had assumed people would probably want to just do 9 to 5:30 and then have a bit of downtime, but there was quite a lot of feedback about trying to do some social events online as well, which probably we forgot about as a business ourselves. We used to be quite social and go out for team meals and stuff like that, which obviously we're not doing now. So we're trying to encourage a few other things to do that engagement. And those surveys will also uncover, how people are really feeling. So try and get them to be anonymous if you can. We used a recent tool that was free to use, so we're happy to share that link if we can via Manuel afterwards. And it kind of gave us what we needed. It was easy to set up, and we can make some adjustments to the questions if we wanted to. But overall, it's a quick and easy tool to get out, and it's anonymous, which I think allowed us to get a lot more information from our team who may not have necessarily disclosed some information if they knew it was going to be attributable to them. So as business leaders, I would encourage you to make sure your managers are still having those one-to-ones with their team, particularly if they're, we might have had new starters who are due a probationary review. Your annual appraisals might still be needed to take place. But day to day, you should be having catch-ups with your team, and certainly once a week in this environment, we'd encourage you to take a bit more time out and maybe have that face-to-face screen time with them, so that they do actually feel that you're engaging with them. And it might not necessarily be about directing the work that they're doing, but just asking them generally how they are doing as well, because it isn't a normal environment for everybody. Some of the other things we probably forget, and I know Amanda touched on it as well, about recognising acts of kindness, but it's also about more general work as well. There's a lot of your staff who may not have been furloughed, and those individuals who are still at work are probably likely to be working harder and longer than they ever have in the past. There is obviously those that have been furloughed and they're not at work, but the kind of work will probably still be going on to a degree and being picked up by the members of their team. So it's important that we recognise their efforts as well where possible. And I would do that publicly as well, not just an email saying thank you, but a wider share, so that the other members of the team can also see that people are being recognised for their efforts. So the other thing we touched on, it's something we're going to be doing now, is team building activities like quizzes. You know, that was led by the survey that we introduced. Fortunately, I'm not going to be the quiz master on that one when a member of the teams has stepped up to ask those questions for us, which is great. But some of the other things you need to consider is, you know, as a business, we used to celebrate birthdays internally. You know, everybody used to go around to people's desks and sing happy birthday to them, and other special occasions as well. And obviously there's been occasions throughout lockdown that people have had birthdays and other special occasions that you may be missing out on if you're not on top of it. So we encourage you to think about employees' upcoming birthdays and any other kind of anniversaries to make sure that they're still being celebrated as well. And above all, try to have some fun as well. So those team chats you're having, your one-to-ones, try and have a bit of humour in them to kind of engage with your employees. A bit of humour in these tough times goes a long way, we're finding. And again, some of the points that Amanda touched on already. So review company benefits, you know, are they really right and tailored to support a home-based workforce? You know, I know we've touched about EAPs a couple of times now, but with some EAP schemes, you do allow face-to-face contact as well. Well, you know, is that still happening? You know, make sure you're with a provider that has, you know, stepped up to the digital age and is enabling those face-to-face contacts to happen via, you know, Zoom or Teams or whatever it might be. You know, we looked at our policies internally. Obviously, when you're in lockdown, you don't want to take any holiday really because there's nowhere to go. You know, we've had a few individuals cancel holidays, but obviously we've been very busy as a business throughout this period of time, and we introduced an extra 3 days leave to all of our team to take throughout this lockdown period to make sure that they were still getting rest throughout this period, because otherwise there's a tendency for people to not take leave during this time, which is going to add a degree of potential burnout for your members of team who are not getting the rest that they would normally have taken every couple of weeks. The other thing to consider is flexibility of working hours. So we've touched on it a couple of times throughout the session, but it isn't business as usual. You know, there's many employees who are working at home whilst also trying to educate their children, and also working at home with partners that they're not used to doing as well, which may be interfering with some of the technology that they're using at home as well. So we encourage you to try and talk to your members of staff to work out, you know, is it working for them? Is 9 to 5:30 the right plan for them? Obviously, if they're a customer-facing role that need to be around 9 to 5:30, you need to take that into consideration. But where possible, can some of their working hours be shifted to enable them to, you know, work around the extra responsibilities they may be having in terms of supporting their children or other family members that are dependent on them? And that might be that some of their work is done outside of normal hours. They may want to reduce their hours during this period of time, you know, from, say, 7 hours a day to 5 hours a day, or they might want to have the flexibility to perhaps do some work during the day and then catch up on a little bit, you know, when their children have gone to bed or when they have more time without the extra responsibilities they're experiencing at home. And that was kind of a bit of a nutshell of some of the things we're doing and some advice that we'll give to you in terms of trying to encourage that engagement to continue with your employees. But if you have any questions on any of the topics we've discussed today, then please do. But other than that, I'll hand you back to Emmanuel.
Thank you, Greg. We have some questions.
Okay.
Okay. Can you insist that staff engage in training if they are on furlough?
So it's a bit of a jury's out on that one. In terms of insisting they should do it, I wouldn't say you can, but they are obviously allowed to do training whilst they're on furlough. So I would certainly encourage them to do that. And we've done that with a couple of members of our team who were undergoing qualifications at the time. We've asked them to use that time to, you know, complete their qualification, which they are doing. I think it depends on what kind of training it is and how it's managed. You know, an online course is obviously a little bit easier for them to go through. And if it was work related, obviously then you can try and encourage them to do it. But mandating it, I think, is going to be difficult in this period of time.
Okay, thank you. Could you share questions for the employee surveys, please, or give examples of questions?
Yeah, so we're happy to share the tool that we've been using, and it is a free tool. But it's quite simply, we were asking about, are you getting enough information from us as a business? What else can we do to support you through this difficult time? Other things included about the technology that we've provided. So obviously everybody had a laptop and headsets and stuff like that, but was there anything else that we needed that we hadn't potentially considered that they needed to have at home, and things like that really. So I can share a long list that we've given as part of the tool we use, but also additional ones if you want. I don't know the best way to do that, Emmanuel, if people ask you, or we'll just give you some lists to send out to the delegates afterwards.
Yeah, if you're happy to send an example, Greg, we can actually follow up. We're going to send an email to all delegates with a recording, with some information, actually, some interesting documents called Working Alone and Working Together, which have been developed by an organization called WSR. So we're very happy to add that to the list if that's okay with you.
That's fine, yeah, we'll definitely share those.
Thank you. And then we've got somebody who are saying a lot of resentment from working employees towards their colleagues who are furloughed. And they would like recognition for still coming into work and placing themselves at a greater risk. And the CEO of the organization has blanket acknowledged their dedication and hard work in his communication, but employees are asking for physical reward and recognition. So do you have any suggestion or examples that your own clients have adopted?
So obviously we did the lockdown leave ourselves for all of our team. So the extra 3 days leave to recognise that people who continue to work who weren't furloughed. I have seen other examples that there's a variety of degree of responses from their employees where they've sent hampers out to their staff who've continued to work through this period of time, and it might have included toilet rolls and hand wipes and stuff like that, but also food parcels and stuff like that. I've seen other organizations just give box of chocolates to all of their staff. I think it's really important that the organization understands their employees, because what's right for one organization might not be right for another. So you need to take those factors into consideration. Giving somebody or everybody some extra days leave is actually probably a lot more meaningful because of this period of time. People haven't had those holidays. So I think it's a fairly easy thing to introduce, and you can kind of give some restrictions about when you're expecting them to take that. We've encouraged our staff to do it through through lockdown to make sure they're getting a break, but it might be that you let them take that outside of the current lockdown period, so that they know that they can have a nice longer holiday when we come out of this the other end.
Would you mind if I added a point in as well, Emmanuel, onto what Greg's been saying? I think they're all fantastic ideas, and yes, I agree with them entirely about ensuring you understand your employee base before you try and go ahead and do something. I think the extra holiday is such a great idea, Greg. It's a really nice acknowledgement, and it's material that people can really appreciate. But I think there will always be people that are going to critique or ask for more or feel a bit hard done by. It's understanding that may not be your entire employee base feeling that way. It might be somebody who's feeling a bit aggrieved at it. And I would say the benefit those people are getting is their full salary and being able to maintain all that sense of purpose and all the other benefits that come with us feeling purposeful and like we're achieving within our jobs as a rule. Clearly people feel a little more at risk, and maybe greatly more at risk and anxious about work. And I think it is, as Greg said, really important to, when you understand what people really would benefit from, to offer something. But it's also worth remembering that those people are getting to go to work and still feel fulfilled by their roles as well, and achieve their full salary, which is something that furloughed people and the many people that have actually just lost their jobs entirely won't get. So it is, I concede to Greg's point entirely. It's about really understanding your employee base as a whole.
Yeah, and I think some of that resentment might come from where a lot of individuals would be, well, I'd actually prefer to be furloughed, because you're getting 80% of your pay and you're not working, and particularly though if you've got young children, it is a very difficult time being a teacher and actually working, and that might be where some of this resentment is coming from. So maybe think about how else you can support those individuals, and it might be about the flexibility of their working hours, or even just signposting them to where they might find additional support for their children. There's a lot of free tools out there for like homeschooling. Joe Wicks is a great example of PE, but there is other tools out there. And it is really about understanding where this kind of resentment is coming from, because I think there's a lot of free stuff out there, and even if you're just signposting to those free tools, it will definitely show that you're engaged and appreciate the work that they're doing.
Yeah, recognition is not about, sorry, Sheena, I was going to say recognition isn't always about a reward. Yeah. It's about being understood. Recognise the situation I'm in, recognise what I need, recognise what I'm doing. The word recognition, people term it and they get, it's easy to get drawn into what can I have, whereas actually it's not always something material. It's about being recognised and understood. Sorry, Sheena.
That's okay. I was just going to add to your points where, yes, it is recognising what the employees, people who may feel a bit resentful towards what might be happening at the moment, but also when you're looking at your decisions around furlough, we understand that some organisations are maybe rotating who's on furlough. It's got to be for that minimum period of 3 weeks, but they may have individuals that they can rotate, and in those ways that might try to resolve some of those feelings if some individuals would also want to have that experience or that status for a period, which will help their personal situation. So again, yes, it's definitely having those further detailed discussions with your employees and understand where they're coming from and why. Okay.
Was there any more questions?
No, I think that's it. Oh, sorry, actually. No, thank you for the suggestion. We've had some good comment. Somebody was enjoying the first session. So we've answered all the questions. So I would like to thank you all, Amanda, Sheena, and Greg, for all the tips and information about well-being, about engaging, about supporting employees, which are very important in this moment in time. Thank you all to taking the time to join us. And as I said, we will follow up with an email, with a recording, with some more information. And please, if you have any more questions or any feedback, please contact the Growth Hub. Have a good day and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.